Welcome to March 2021 Community in the Courthouse, Women in Public Safety and on the Front Lines. Our program will begin momentarily.
We're going to start in about 60 seconds to all the panelists. We're going to start in about 60 seconds. Good evening, everyone. Are we live? Are we ready to get started, Madam Communications Director?
Yes, ma'am, we're live.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. I am so delighted to welcome you to the very first Community in the Courthouse of 2021. And I am Karen Tolles. I am so honored and delighted and thrilled to be the new Director of Community Affairs for the Honorable Aisha Brave Boyd. And you will hear from her momentarily, but she is also very excited. COVID cannot stop us from celebrating the wonderful work that our women in Prince George's County and the state of Maryland is doing on the front lines and around public safety. And so I thank all of you all, the panelists, for taking time out of your evening for joining us, as well as those that are listening. You are in for a treat. These are some dynamic women in Prince George's County doing dynamic work for all of you all in Prince George's County. We not only have women from Prince George's, we have women from the state of Maryland. And so our state's attorney has only brought the best and the brightest women we have in our state to talk to you about the work that they're doing to keep the community safe here in our wonderful county. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful Chief of Staff, Ms. Judy Danso, who will bring you some remarks as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Tolles. I share in her same sentiments. We are absolutely so excited to be back in effect with our monthly community in the courthouse, even if we can only just kind of smile and, give each other virtual hugs and high fives from now until we can safely reconvene back in the courthouse. But I'll tell you that the state's attorney has said to us, you all make sure we get these community in the courthouses back up and running, because I miss my people. I need to be able to connect with them and engage the best way we know how. And so here we are. But to be quite honest with you, although we have been certainly in the midst of a pandemic over the last year, we've continued to remain busy in ensuring that we keep our community engaged around the work that we're doing, in addition to prioritizing the focus of our cases in line with where we are in our courthouse reopening process. So please continue to remain connected with us, much of the work that we're doing in the office, and just also reach out with respect to any specific interests, any specific questions or concerns that you all may have. We certainly strive to remain responsive to our communities at all times. But I will not, delay any further at this time. We are really honored to have such an amazing panel of esteemed women in public safety and on the front lines this evening as a part of our panel discussion as we close out Women's Her Story Month. And so with that, I will certainly turn it over to our state's attorney, the Honorable Aisha Braveboy, for a few welcoming remarks, and then we'll get started with the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Madam Chief of Staff, and to our new Director of Community Affairs, Karen Tolles. We're so excited that you have joined us. You were formerly an elected official representing, I call it the heart of Prince George's County in District 7. And so now you will take the skills and talents that you learned there and serve our office with that. So we're really excited to have you with us. But I'm really excited to celebrate women who are in leadership here in Prince George's County and throughout the state of Maryland, who are leading in so many areas of public safety. It is an honor to serve with these women, not just because they're women, but because they are experienced, because they have passion, they have drive, they have focus, and they care about our communities. So we have today with us Captain Barreen Barton from the Maryland National Capital Park Police. We also have our very first female fire chief, Tiffany Green, who you'll hear from. We also have our director of the Department of Corrections, Corinne LeBay. So I'm really excited for many of you to get to know her and hear about the work that she's doing around our jails. You will also hear from Carolyn Scruggs, the Assistant Secretary at the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. And last but certainly not least, Beverly Woodard. She is a retired associate judge, but we do expect to see her on the bench in the near future, representing the Circuit Court for Prince George's County. So look, I want to cut my remarks short just because I know we really just want to get in to the discussion, the questions. But what I will say is just a quote from Vice President Kamala Harris, who's a fellow Howard alum. She said, "Breaking those barriers are worth it. As much as anything else, it is to create the path for those who will come after us. And let me tell you, these women are absolutely creating that path. And that's why I'm so excited for you all to hear from them today. So thank you again. And I'll turn it back over to Madam Chief of Staff.
Thank you so much, Madam State's Attorney. Okay, so at this time, we are going to do a brief introduction of our speakers and panelists for this evening. I have the honor and pleasure of briefly introducing the Honorable Beverly J. Woodard. And around our office, let me just say this, if you know Judge Woodard, you've been in her courtroom, which I have a time or two, you know that she's no nonsense. She certainly, you can feel the level of passion that she has from the bench, and then absolutely her understanding and knowledge of the law. I think there's a saying around our office where we say, if you walk out of Judge Woodard's courtroom, you know, the Honorable Beverly J didn't come to play. So you knew what time it was when you walked out of her courtroom. But Judge Woodard has served as Associate Judge in Prince George's County since Maryland, in Prince George's County since 1998, although she recently retired. She was first on the district court bench for 10 years and then moved up to the circuit court in 2008. One of her initiatives has been to implement alternative programs to incarceration for offenders with alcohol, substance abuse, and mental health issues. She successfully launched a district court drug court program and a circuit court veterans treatment program. Judge Woodard's passion has always centered around adoption issues, and she, since 2010, has coordinated the National Adoption Day program for the Prince George's County Circuit Court. The Honorable Beverly J. Woodard.
Hello, I would just. I'm sorry, Madam Chief of Staff. Okay. I would just piggyback on that. And I remember being a law student in Beverly Woodard's courtroom, and she's a great inspiration. And so I can say I'm a former law student now. So you have inspired women like myself. So with that, we have another dynamic woman, an icon in Prince George's County, if you will. You've seen her. She's been all over. People talk about our wonderful first female fire chief of Prince George's County, Tiffany B. Green. And I will start by saying that this is very important. When you're a woman, you are a wife. She's a wife, a mother, and our fire chief. So she is doing everything women do all the time. And prior to her becoming, having this historic appointment, she was the deputy fire chief. And in that capacity, she was responsible for the administration of the Services Command, and she managed the agency's human resources, fiscal affairs. I remember seeing her in the budget committee a few times or two. She was managed information management, risk management, and the Office of Service Excellence, Accreditation, and Research. And prior to her command staff experience, she served in an array of agency roles, not only firefighter, but pandemic, station commander, executive assistant to the public safety director, chief of staff to director of Homeland Security, and special events coordinator and stadium commander for FedEx Field. And so, we are delighted to have this wonderful, wonderful fire chief of Prince George's County join us for our panel discussion today.
Thank you. Our next esteemed woman in public safety and on the front lines is Director Corinne LeBay, who serves as our director for the Prince George's County Department of Corrections. She has been in this role since August 1st. But before her role as acting director, Ms. LeBay served as the deputy director for the Bureau of Administration since 2014, where she had oversight of the department's support services, community corrections, and inmate services divisions. She's been employed with the department for 30+ years and worked in several capacities to include, but not limited to, support services division chief, community corrections division coordinator, and grants coordinator. We're so happy to have her a part of our panel.
Next, esteemed woman that I have the pleasure of introducing is our Assistant Secretary, Carolyn J. Scruggs, and she's responsible for overseeing inmate programs, substance abuse, medical and mental health treatment, Americans with disabilities, staff, occupational health, correctional education, social work, and reentry. And she has been doing a lot in our jail systems. And as Assistant Secretary, Scruggs began her career in the Maryland criminal justice system in 1992 with the District Court of Maryland as a district court commissioner. She is a professional criminal justice executive with proven abilities to mentor and develop organizations and staff with enthusiasm, excellence, and discipline. And so we are so excited to have this charismatic leader join us today on our esteemed panel.
And next we have an amazing and dynamic leader who I absolutely admire. She's a bad woman walking, Lieutenant Vereen Barton. Lieutenant Barton knew that she was called to serve and has done so for the past 20 plus years. Her career has been as a first responder in law enforcement. Her experience include firefighter EMT with the Bladensburg Fire Department, a dispatcher with the Prince George's County Police Department, and her current role as a police lieutenant with Maryland National Capital Park Police. She has served with the Maryland National Capital Park Police for 18 years in a variety of positions. And throughout the year, she has been assigned to patrol services, recruiting, internal affairs, and investigative services. She currently serves as the commander for the Internal Affairs Services and Recruiting Unit, Lieutenant Vereen Barton.
And certainly last but not least, our second woman to be elected as State's Attorney for Prince George's County, the Honorable Aisha Braveboy, will also be one of our speakers, and she will be put in the hot seat. But if I read her bio, I'll get in trouble because I know she wants us to get to these questions. She's in her head. Just know that she's the second woman to serve in this position and first elected in 2018. And so to her, crime is personal. And I can tell you, we do criminal work, civil work, everything that deals with the quality of life for the residents of Prince George's County. And she is a Prince George's County homegirl, proud Howard alum. And so she is really excited to be here to join all of you all today, our esteemed panelists. And with that, we will get right to the questions.
That's right. Thank you, Director Tolles.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get right to it. We'll have a variety of questions that will certainly be posed to various panelists for tonight's discussion. Certainly for those of you that are listening in and participating in our event, you will have an opportunity to ask any specific questions that you may have for our guests and panelists this evening. So please be mindful of the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to type any questions that you may have. Okay, so we are discussing women on the front lines. And you know, we hear bios, we can read about them, but nothing is more personal than absolutely hearing and understanding from that particular individual what their walk is, what that journey looks like. So our initial opening question for all of our esteemed panelists this evening is, how did you get here? If you could just briefly share with us what your journey was to your current position. And I guess we'll start with Judge Woodard.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. All right. I was born and raised in New York City. My father was a New York City police detective, so you could say I had law in my blood from the very beginning. And so after law school, I came down to the District of Columbia, worked in the federal government for about 10 years, but I wasn't very happy because I wanted to work with people and I just wasn't getting a fulfillment in my life in the job I had. So I was very fortunate. I came out and got the job at the state's attorney's office, took a $10,000 pay cut, but I did not care because I knew that I wanted to work with people. And so then I was fortunate to work for Alex Williams and then Jack Johnson. And after 12 years, and I worked as the chief of the sexual assault child abuse unit, which was a very difficult unit. You could never work there and hang your hat on how many trials you won. It was about how many lives you impacted and how many children and women who you believed in and who you made feel better. And then I was very fortunate after that to be appointed to the district court bench for 10 years. I did start the drug court program there. And then I got elevated to circuit court. And I was there for 13 years. I really just retired 3 weeks ago. And I started the Veterans Court program. And I think we are at the circuit court level, the only Veterans Court program in the state of Maryland, to be honest with you. And so that's just a little brief synopsis of my journey. 35 years in that courthouse, one way or the other. Thank you.
Absolutely, Judge. Thank you so much. Director LeBay or Chief Green, actually. Let's go with Chief Green.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So I guess my journey is a little different. It's not traditional as it relates to the fire service. Growing up as a young adult living in Prince George's County, I didn't know anyone in the fire service at all. I didn't know where the firehouse was, nor did I know anyone in the fire service. Graduated from Riverdale Baptist High School, went to George Washington University. While at George Washington University, I was taking a class as an elective EMT class, emergency medical technician class. And one of the requirements was that we did a ride along at a local fire station or a neighboring fire station to work on our skills as it relates to emergency medicine. I was given the opportunity to work in the ride along at volunteer fire station, station 842 in Oxon Hill, Maryland. Believe it or not, I lived in Fort Washington and did not even know where that fire station is. And at 18, 19 years old, my mom still had to take me there because I didn't know where I was going. Long story short, I ended up doing my ride along there. And at the conclusion of that ride along, I enjoyed the experience so much that I decided to become a volunteer. And that's kind of where my journey began. It began as a volunteer. And that kind of goes back to the roots of how I grew up. I grew up in a family that supported service to the community and made service a part of everything that we did. So it was a natural transaction for me to go into that type of environment, and I began to volunteer. I volunteered for 4 years, graduated from college, pursued a bunch of other options. And at the end of the day, my desire to serve the community made me actually make a career change and become a career firefighter in March of 1999. So I started my career fire service in March of 99 with Prince George's County Fire Department, where I started. And I just kind of progressed through the ranks up through the years, every 2 years, taking a different assignment, a different role, and different promotions, and ultimately landing where I'm at now as the fire chief for Prince George's County Fire and EMS Department. So that's my story.
Thank you, Chief. Director LeBay, you can share a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Good evening. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I came to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area for education. I'm a Howard University alum. Go HU. Mm-hmm. And as a result of it, I ended up meeting my husband here and meeting here. As a child, I kind of knew what I wanted to, I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had an experience as a teenager where a friend of mine's friend was incarcerated as a young man. And we went to visit that young man, and the images stayed with me most of my life. And so I said, I'm a child of the 70s. So you can imagine going up in the 70s and the transition in America with the African Americans becoming more conscious, and the civil rights movement and all that had a reflection on me. But I didn't go in that direction originally. I started out working in private industry, doing resource work. And in that job, one of my requirements was to try to hire ex-offenders under, and they were called ex-offenders then. Today, politically correct word is the returning citizen, to hire ex-offenders for my company, because that would be, we would get a tax credit under the targeted tax credit program. So I ended up establishing a relationship and collaborating with the Bureau of Rehabilitation in Washington, D.C. And we were hiring employees ex-offenders there, and I established a relationship with a young woman who one day called me up and said, we have a position at Prince George's County Department of Corrections. And I had just recently moved to Prince George's County. My company was in Virginia and I was tired of the commute. And she said, why don't you consider it? So I applied, and of course I got hired. I started working out in inmate services, and as time went on, every 2 or 3 years, I was changing positions. Someone told one of the directors that he had a diamond in the rough, and that he needed to reassign this diamond and basically give her some more experience. So as a result of that, my positions changed and I became a grants coordinator, had the benefit of traveling as a consultant across the country, teaching grants and all. And I progressed, and here I am today as Director of Corrections.
And that diamond is bling blinging. Keep on shining, Director LeBlanc. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I mean, I don't know who wants to go next, Lieutenant Barton or Assistant Secretary Scruggs. It's up to you.
All right, I'll go. My journey started, I'm actually an islander. I am from Jamaica, and let's fast forward. I went to Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana, but I've always wanted to serve. I have a family of nurses and attorneys and people who serve the community and police officers. So I have always wanted to serve. I joined Bladensburg Fire Department, moved to Maryland and joined Bladensburg Fire Department. And I loved it. I loved helping people. And then I went and worked at Prince George's County Police Department as a dispatcher. And I also wanted to follow in my uncle's footsteps as a police officer. And I saw where I could make a difference because I felt like I had a lot to give and to share, to give to our community. And so I aligned myself with Maryland National Capital Park Police because their vision and my vision aligned. We are about helping people, getting out into the community, learning about our citizens and working hand in hand with them. And that's what I did. One of my biggest passion is domestic violence awareness. And I have partnered with Prince George's Hospital Center, now University of Maryland, the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center. And it's been an amazing journey. And I am glad that I'm able to help empower women to get into better situations and also to serve. I believe in service, and that's who I am. That's my journey.
Absolutely, Lieutenant Barton. Thank you. Secretary Scruggs, last but certainly not least.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carolyn Scruggs, and I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Department of Public Safety. I am not a Prince George's County resident, but I have many family members that are. I was born and raised in Baltimore City, now residing in Pikesville, Baltimore County. My journey probably starts when I was about 16 years old. I graduated from high school early at the age of 16, and my parents said, you do nothing else but go to school. So my intent was to go to law school. But once I started, I graduated from Towson State and then from Coppin State with a master's in criminal justice because like many of you, my family were a family of givers. My dad was very popular in the community because he had a business there in the community. My mother was in education, and there were always other children in my home other than those that came from my parents, which was my brother and I. So we were always giving, and we were always known to take care of those that didn't have as much as we were. As we had. So that part of me led to the desire to want to be able to help others. Also being brought up in Baltimore City. I was brought up during a time when it was drug infested. I could walk out on my block and I could see those things occurring. I even knew some of the people because I went to school with them or their siblings. And I just knew that there was a need to change. So as I graduated and started to look for employment, my first employment was with the District Court of Maryland. And while I served as a court commissioner, Judge Reinhardt actually took me on as one of her mentees. And when the city decided that they were going to transfer their arrest processing to a centralized system and build the central booking in Baltimore City. She said, you would be a great candidate to go there and work. So I went to central booking with the recommendation of Judge Reinhardt to be what was called an administrative officer there to help process arrests, not knowing that eventually and within a few years, they were going to change all of us to correctional officers. Ended up moving up the ranks there, up to the rank of major. I left there and went to the Criminal Justice Information System, still part of Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services as Assistant Director. And I was responsible for all of their fingerprints in the state of Maryland, the processing of all of those prints, and working as a liaison with the FBI for that. Actually circled back to central booking after that as the assistant warden, later became the warden of central booking. A couple of years later, became assistant secretary for the division of pretrial, which are all of our offenders that have not gone to court as of yet. And then I eventually became deputy commissioner for the division of corrections. And those are our offenders, of course, that are sentenced. And then we received a wonderful blessing and a secretary of Mr. Robert Green, who many of you know, and he reached down to me and said, so why are you still sitting there? We need an assistant secretary for reentry. And knowing that that is a passion that I have like he does and giving back, I took on that opportunity as the assistant secretary for reentry services. And it's been a little over a year now since I've been in that position. So that's in brief my journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Secretary Scruggs. And of course, Madam State Attorney, we want to hear a little bit about your journey too now.
Sure. Well, let me just tell you, my journey, I think, starts, I'm going to say, with my father who came here from Grenada. And the reason why I think it starts in many ways with him is because he was someone who decided that he was going to change, the condition for his family and his community by going off, getting an education, and then reaching back and helping those who stayed in the island. And I saw him do that so many times for our family members. And so I think in many ways he instilled the value of service and helping others, especially those who may not get the same opportunities that you got. My mother also was very instrumental. She's a fighter. She always, thought, look, if this is the right thing, then we're going to get the right thing done. And so she fought for me as a student in our school system. I saw her fight on behalf of other students. She was our PTA president, and she made such a big difference. And I realized that you can serve pretty much in any role if you have the passion and heart for service, and you can make a difference in the lives of people. But one of the things that my parents have always taught me was to, take on challenges. And sometimes it is you who is the change that people are waiting for or are seeking. And so being in public service for me was really about that, because I did not intend to go into elective office. I went to law school. I was working for the Federal Communications Commission, and I was there for a couple of years when I helped out someone who ran locally for a county executive and won. And then they asked if I would come and work for the Office of the County Executive. And through my work there, I would work, 9 to 5, have my day job. In the evenings, I would go out and represent the office at different community meetings. So I really got to know and love the members of my community. And I would always try to work with them to connect them to the services of the government. And then my passion continued to grow for service. And I worked along with a community advocate by the name of Phil Lee to create the largest juvenile diversion program in the county. And that program is still working now, but it taught me also that if there's an idea that you have, that you can, build upon that idea and make it a reality. And that happened. We have diverted over now probably 5,000 young people out of the criminal and juvenile justice system, which is remarkable. And so when I took this journey to become state's attorney, again, it wasn't something that I had originally planned for my life. I did not start off as a prosecutor, and so I didn't have that criminal law background, but I did, again, work with our young people and those who were in the juvenile justice system for about 15 years before I ran for this office. So I had experience looking at different parts of our justice system and how to make it better and fairer, especially for our young people. So when the opportunity came, because I also had served as a state delegate for 8 years, and when the opportunity came to run for this office, I jumped at the chance, not because I just wanted to be state's attorney, but I thought I could make a difference. And so we've been working with all of the stakeholders who you see here this evening to make that difference. I could probably point to each and every one of them and tell you the work that we've done, but I know that'll come out during the Q&A. But I'm so excited to have such dynamic, phenomenal, smart, committed women who are in the justice system and in public safety who have the same values that I have.
Absolutely. Awesome, awesome, awesome. It's just always awe-inspiring to hear the personal stories and the journeys that you have shared with all of us this evening. So thank you so much. I think it's important for our community to really understand the different perspectives and the walks of life that each of you have come from. So again, thank you so much for sharing on that. Karen, do you have a few questions?
I do. Now that you have pulled their life stories out of them and they got to this journey, I want to know what y'all doing while y'all there. Y'all look good. You representing us well, but are you just, they're looking good? Or are you actually doing the work of the people? So I'm going to start with the question for our Chief Green. Now that you are chief, and I worked with you in the past, and so I would tell you a little story. We were out and about, and this was in 2018, and I said to my good friend Andrew Pantelis, and he would tell you I said this. I said, so who y'all gonna put as fire chief? Y'all did all this work now to get the county executive elected. I want to see you use this. Because it's not many minorities in the fire department, it's not many women. What y'all gonna do? And while they're some of my favorite people in the world, everybody probably know this, that I love me 1619, and they did not disappoint with their appointment. They told me they would do it. They told me they secretly told me they were supporting you, but you served as a volunteer firefighter as well. So you bring a wonderful combination of experience. What are you doing to get more minorities? That includes Black women, Hispanic women, white women, women in general, and women of color to be recruited in the fire department. I saw these amazing photographs of some of the great women we have, but what are you doing to get more women in Prince George's County in the fire department?
Right. So first of all, thank you so much for that introduction. And you're right. 1619 has been a great partner for me, and they've been here throughout the entire time, throughout my entire career. So I appreciate their support. They're not without a fight, though. They let me know when they think I'm doing something wrong, and I appreciate that and I respect that, because again, we're all trying to move this department forward in this great county. So great. So you bring up a great question. So again, it's not unknown that there is obviously a small amount of women in the fire service. This is a very male-dominated profession. So we work very hard as a department to make sure that we put women on the front lines and right out in the very beginning of our recruitment and our social media campaigns. I say this all the time, that you can't be what you can't see. So if we cannot, as an agency, put women in the front line so that people can see them, young women, girls, or just even women who never thought of this profession as something that they could do. What I have found is when we have done that, when we have actively and intentionally recruited women and started by making sure that they're on the very front of our social media campaigns, and as a department pushing them forward, that has given us the best reward. So currently right now we have 400 women in our department across both the volunteer and career spectrum. And that is a tremendous achievement for the department. But it didn't happen just what's the word I want to say? It didn't happen casually.
Half-heartedly.
Half-heartedly. We focused on it. We literally made sure that we made that intentional. And what I mean by that is we made sure that we put women in every aspect of our department and throughout our division and put them in the forefront. So you'll see on our social media campaigns, we do a lot of advertisement as it relates to women and recruitment and diversity for our department, because it's not just about gender, it's not just about women, it's also about diversity in all aspects of our department, race, gender, as well as diversity with thoughts and age, just making sure we have the right people at the table. And that to me has been effective for the last year and a half for us to do that. So that's what we're doing right now. And we're seeing the results of that with having a great campaign of women interested in the fire service. And we think that we'll see a transformation in the fire service in the next few years where women won't be just the minorities. And it's my goal to not just be the first fire chief, but not to be the last. So that's what we're doing.
There you go. That's the look. We gotta, the words of Vice President Kamala Harris, as State's Attorney mentioned in the opening, lives with all of us. It's something that we all live by, and I can say that I know that we are delighted to have you as partners in the State's Attorney's office. Your men and women keep all of us safe, and so we thank you. And it sounds like you're on the job. You're not just there; you're actually on the job. So I pose that question to any one of our women. Judge Woodard, I had been in your courtroom. What is it like to be a woman judge and be empathetic? Have you talk to me about those relationships, that whether it's with defendants or prosecutors or just victims? What is it like to be as a woman and to work with other women and recruit other women judges and prosecutors or defendants? Just tell me about this dynamic thing about being a woman in public safety and empowered.
Okay, well, on the bench, you have the opportunity to, of course, to quote unquote, you are in charge. But there are sometimes when there are male, let's say, attorneys out there who don't give you the respect that they would maybe give to a male judge simply because you are a female. And so you have to learn how to carefully make sure that they understand that you understand the law and that you are the judge in charge. I have been delighted at the number of female attorneys from the state's attorney's office that have been in front of me. I love seeing them and I love working with them. And I always offer, an open door policy to them to come to my chambers so that they can improve. Because everyone can improve. It doesn't matter what stage you are in your career, you can always learn something as you move on. And so I try very hard to have that policy. And I think that a lot of the attorneys in your office have accepted that policy and have come to see me. And those who want to move up to be a judge in particular have come to see me to talk about my journey and what would I suggest that they do in order to become a judge. And so when it comes to, and as you can see from our bench, we have a lot of females now on the bench. Mm-hmm. If you walk the halls of the courthouse and you look at the portraits on the wall, you can tell the evolution of what's going on in Prince George's County in terms of the diversity and makeup of the bench. And so I'm really happy to be on the bench, and I'm very happy to be under our chief, Judge Tillerson Adams, who is excellent at making sure that we are all, her motto is be fair and just, and she keeps us on our toes. And so I say that's what's going on for me on the bench. Thank you.
Well, you definitely, thank you for sharing that story. You definitely have a good role model. I know I've heard so many great ways in which Judge Adams has mentored so many women and other judges throughout her career and tenure as well. So
the greatest of all time, you know it. Okay, laid the path and the foundation for so many here.
So many.
So thank you, Judge, for sharing and responding to that particular question. I do want to pose a question to our women in corrections, Director LeBay and Secretary Scruggs. We talk a lot about what we're seeing in terms of reforms, whether it's criminal justice reform, social justice reform. In your specific roles, how are you intentionally remaining conscious of reforming your respective agencies?
Okay, I'll go first. Well, I think the biggest thing right now with reform is refocusing the mission in corrections. So often in the past, it was lock them up and throw away the key. As we move forward, the biggest thing we can do to reform is to understand that there is a systemic problem as to why these people are there. And we need to get to that, be it a mental health issue, be it something going on in the home that they were dealing with, but how do we provide them the services? Knowledge is power. Give them the education, educate them, teach them how to do things that they normally don't know how to do. Re-entry is so important, especially to our population behind the wall, because we want them to come out and be productive citizens. So we want to provide them all of the skills that they need so that they don't come back to visit us again, but so that when they come out, they can sustain in society, so that they can help to raise their children, so that they can be productive within their families. So I think instead of us just years ago when I first started, it was you lock them up. Segregation was big. You put them on segregation when they did something wrong. Now there's a reason that they're going to segregation if they need to be segregated. And we need to have the psychologists and psychiatrists look and talk to them to see what triggered these behaviors that you're doing, not just lock them up because they did something that was an adjustment that they ended up having to get a punishment for or an administrative action for. We really need to rebuild that returning citizen and give them the tools to sustain. So job training, any type of positive community involvement that we can give them as they start to return into their communities where they're going to live, where they're going to work. Those are the type of things that we want to do with reform, because then that not only helps them, but it helps our communities. It helps us to build better communities because we're bringing a better citizen back into the community that now has a mindset that they can then train those others that are in the community that may have fallen by the wayside or choose to fall by the wayside. They can guide them and provide guidance based on their experience and knowledge.
Absolutely. Thank you. Director LeBay, and you can answer the same questions, but I will tell you, we're starting to get questions coming in from the community already, and I'm reading the Q&A box, and you can integrate this in your response if you so choose. But one of the questions about reform is with respect to individuals that are released and homelessness. And so the question is about who's responsible for housing and jobs and medical and social service and things like that. And how are you obviously remaining conscious of that as Director of DOC around reforms as well?
Okay, as you know, reform means bringing about something new. So for me, reform works two ways. I ditto everything that Secretary Scruggs said, but I also want to say that I also have to start with reform with staff development with my staff as well. So they need training opportunities to realize that you need to see the incarcerated differently. That's an individual and it has nothing to do with their circumstances. And so I believe in the importance of training them. And as Secretary Scruggs says, that knowledge is power. So their thinking has to go. We're not just incarcerating what we would call someone who offended the law, but this is an individual who may have needs and you may not know the circumstances of what their needs are. So your perspective of how you deal with them is different. So reform for me begins with training my staff to learn how to not only look at themselves as providing custodial care and security, which is very important in our world of corrections, because that's our number one priority, as well as safety, but also that you have to have a programmatic mind. You have to be able to use your interpersonal skills, able to have knowledge to know when to intervene and assist that individual that is incarcerated. My second reform, since this is Women's History Month, I'd like to talk about the female offender. Sometimes she's the silent voice that no one ever pays attention to. her needs are different than the male offender. And in this system, the female offender has been overlooked. She's been incarcerated, but people don't look at her needs, that she might be pregnant. She might have other issues going on. She might have other behavioral issues. Her social reasons for getting there. She may have children left on the street. And so her children may feel abandoned, but she may also be dealing with abandonment issues. So counseling may also be necessary. So the trends and the laws are changing also to help support those female offenders. And so that's one reform that I also want to be conscious of. But the main thing today for me is wellness. And I'm talking about wellness from my staff, as well as wellness for the incarcerated population and those returning to the community, the returning citizen. And so everyone has to look at that. The majority of those that are incarcerated are going to return to the community. And you rather have them return to the community healthy than to return to the community unhealthy and creating havoc. And so that's how I look at reform. When it comes to housing and when it comes to medical services and jobs and social services, the biggest key to help the returning citizen is a collaboration. And I can't stress that enough with our social service agencies, with the health department, with the state's attorney's office. And I must say, Prince George's County does a very good job with collaborating and its partners and all. And we all do come together to the table to address the needs of our citizens and residents in this county. And so I'm proud to say that as a Prince George's County resident myself, but housing, we work with the Department of Housing as well as social services, particularly with social services because they're responsible for transitional housing for the homeless. We provide medical services in-house. We work with workforce development, Prince George's County workforce development, so that those that are returning to the community can be connected to jobs. We also work with social services where we establish getting individuals that are incarcerated here before they get released to be able to have Medicaid, so that when they get in the community, they still have health insurance and those services can continue. So it's a collaborative effort.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So can I just, Madam Chief of Staff, so the person who was in the chat, who was asking about the needs of someone who is currently homeless, it sounds like there is a specific individual who needs services, a female who is 55. And so sounds to me like we need to connect with this person who it sounds like is their advocate, to connect them with the Department of Social Services so that they can begin to get the services that Director LeBay mentioned. So I think maybe if you could put an email address in the, well, I guess I don't think that they can see you. Well, yes, you can put your email address to Social Consciousness. If you can put your email in the chat, we can then follow up with that person tomorrow, because it sounds like there is someone who needs immediate assistance. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Ms. Barton, would you like to add to some of the great work you are doing in PG Parks with
Sure.
recruiting women and that dynamic?
Sure. So before I talk about the recruiting aspect, I wanted to also add to, on the law enforcement side, and me as a police officer, I can speak for myself with regard to reform. For me, it's about collaboration, transparency, working with and getting advice from external stakeholders. Some of the things that my department already does with regard to how we improve ourselves is through accountability from our public presentation of our department directives on social media. We also have added a lot of de-escalation trainings. Many of our women in leadership within my department are mentors. And we also deal with officer wellness, which is very important because to address the emotional side of a police officer that's out there working with our citizens every day, it's very important. We align ourselves with the needs of the community, wanting change, wanting improvements, and we work together with our community to make sure that we are doing better and we're doing what our community is asking for. So for me, that's where we are with reform. With regard to recruiting, I'm always recruiting. We started a law enforcement career day where we had law enforcement from all over the state coming at Prince George's Sports and Learning. And what I wanted to happen was to recruit people from our community that look like us for our law enforcement to look like what our community looks like. So I recruited as many people from within our community as I could. One of the things that I can say is our female officers are getting into specialty areas such as the mounted unit, investigators. We mentor them so that they have an opportunity to grow as women within law enforcement as well. So that's some of the things that we have been doing.
You know, I just wanted to interrupt the Q&A just for a second because I know that our fire chief, Tiffany Green, has to
I was just about to say that.
I'm sorry.
And so first of all, we want to just thank you so much for joining us. And also, please, our hearts are extended out to your members. I know that they've suffered some it's been tough, right? But I think that they are very fortunate to have someone like you who can not only lead, but also show that level of compassion that is needed during these rough times. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And again, thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me. State's Attorney, this is a phenomenal event. As always, it's always a pleasure to be in your presence, as well as to be a part of anything that you're doing in your office. I'm sorry that I have to go. We do have a few firefighters I need to check on from a few house fires that we've had. But again, it's an honor to serve here today and to be a part of this. And I look forward to being a part of more events.
Thank you so much, Chief Green. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Chief Green, for your leadership.
Absolutely.
Give our best to your men and women. Yes.
Okay, I want to just really quickly read a quick text that I've received from a personal constituent in the county that says that Judge Woodard is absolutely amazing. My friend Dwayne went through her Veterans Court program, and she's been so supportive and compassionate. And so, Judge, we know that no two trials are the same. But I'd like for you to just kind of describe a trial or two that you've had to preside over that really changed your way of thinking. If you can kind of share a little bit about that for us.
You know, some of the trials that have lived with me, now that I'm retired, will always live with me, are the trials involving partners who have been the victim of domestic violence that have ended in either vicious assaults or actually the death of the other partner. And I'm talking about young women and who trusted the other individual and had children with them. And then at the hands of that individual, they lose their lives. Those trials will always live with me. Particularly the defendants who are in front of me, because I have to be honest, a lot of times they don't see where they are. They don't have the remorse that I think that they should exhibit when they commit such a crime. And the other cases, I'm gonna tell you something that I think that's going on in the county that's really disturbing to me. It's not trials, it's the number of young Black men who are fascinated with handguns. I just recently have done 2 involuntary manslaughter cases where young Black men were playing with a gun, just playing with the gun, having fun. It goes off and it kills the other person. One involved a young man who accidentally shot his brother, killed his own brother. Another young man who shot his girlfriend. And I just think that this is, and we know the violence that's going on. We hear about it in the news all the time about gun violence. And I I think that this is something that as a community, we have got to address, because I think it's killing too many young people. It's ruining the lives of too many people. It's impact. Time after time, I have cases where they're just riding in the car and for some reason there's a loaded handgun. And I don't know what we can do. I'm sure that Ms. Braveboy, as the state's attorney, is very, very much aware of this. And I think that all of us, all the other panelists, you know, judges, and everyone who's here today or who's listening, this is to me an epidemic with these guns. It just is an epidemic of this fascination with guns. And I don't know where they get them from. Normally when they're standing in front of me, I never find out how they got their hands on a gun, you know, and I just don't understand how a 19-year-old to a 25-year-old to a whatever can get their hands on a gun so easy and it end in tragedy. And so when you say what's impacting me right now, many trials have, I assure you, but for right now, really bothering me is the cases in front of me about young men and guns. Yeah,
that's a segue for the state attorney to chime in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, first of all, and let me tell you how women work, right? So you've identified that as a problem. We've identified that as a problem as well. And so I went to Judge Adams and said, Judge Adams, you know, we've got too many young people with guns. And, you know, I think prior to now that it was kind of treated as a kind of a pro forma, okay, well, you know, they're charged with, possession, either they're under 21, they're felon in possession, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
They would get charged, they would take whatever plea deal was offered, and then they would essentially get a slap on the wrist if it's their first offense, or a suspended sentence, or home detention, or something like that, but never anything that really changed their behavior or changed their life or got to some of the root issues of why the gun, why is this so important to you? And so I said, you know, instead of us continuing on that path, I wanted to put those individuals in our Back on Track program to give them an opportunity, number one, to get their conviction upon successful completion, get their conviction struck so that they could start their lives or continue their lives without that conviction. But in addition to that, they'd have to work for it. So they'd have to go through a structured program. They would have to be accountable and responsible to others, and most importantly, to themselves,
Mm-hmm.
to get an education, to get job training, to get a job that we will assist them with getting so that they can make better choices than just having a gun. And so we're really excited because Judge Adams agreed to it. And I felt comfortable going to her asking if we could expand our Back on Track program. Will we be able to get the judges to agree to these alternative type of sentences so that we can get people in a better position not to make those same mistakes again? Because what we saw was people, you know, getting the handgun charge, but then it escalated
Mm-hmm.
to armed robbery and an assault, an attempt, or a murder or manslaughter. But what we recognize is that just simply getting that conviction for that gun charge was not changing their lives. And in many cases, it was making it worse, because now they have a conviction for what many people consider a serious offense, making it more difficult for them to get employment. And so we looked at that and said, maybe we can do something a little different. So we just started accepting handgun offenders into the Back on Track program. I want to say maybe about a month and a half ago. And so we're really looking forward to expanding the services in Back on Track to assist those individuals. And so far we've gotten, pretty good response. We think as trial dates get closer, we're going to get more, even better response. But so far, I think individuals have opted for it because it is a real chance for restoration and progress. Because what we've seen with the folks who are in Back on Track right now is that they are not reoffending. Upon successful completion, they're in jobs and are working and have a productive lives, and we're not seeing them again in the justice system. And we want that for more people. And so that's why we had to look at ways of extending those opportunities for more people. But I knew that someone like a Judge Adams would get it, and she did. And I think that's why it's so important to have these diverse voices, female voices in the justice system, because sometimes we see things a little differently. I'm not saying we see it better. I think we just see it a little differently. And we're about solutions. How do we, how do we come up with the right solution? And it's not always convictions and throwing people away and, burdening them for the rest of their lives. Sometimes it's about restoration, and we shouldn't be afraid to do that either.
No, that's a great point. And it's a great opportunity, Madam State's Attorney, to pivot to COVID-19. We saw how the criminal justice system impacted so many during COVID-19. And so I'm just really curious if, sort of each panel member can talk about how COVID-19 has impacted your operations and how has it caused you to lead. And for you, Madam State's Attorney, when you answer, someone in the chat wanted to know, can we go to virtual court? And I think you can better answer that question in terms of, can we go there? We're already there. You and Judge Wood are well aware of that. So just talk about how COVID-19 has interrupted the operations, but how you leading due to this pandemic. And I guess, I'll start with Ms. Barton. I'll start with you, and then if each one of you all can answer that, that'll be wonderful.
So protecting our citizens hasn't stopped through the pandemic. We have learned new ways of going about serving our community. One of the biggest things that I can speak for Maryland National Capital Park Police is because a lot of our events are in the parks or at the community centers. We had to come up with ways where we had to use empathy to understand that the pandemic, is difficult as it is, people are isolated from each other. So yes, we had to keep the laws, but we also had to engage our citizens with understanding, reach out to them, create new ways. One of the examples, a perfect example, is the state's attorney did a bike ride that we social distance, but we were still able to address the health of our citizens, because psychological health is just as important as physical health. And being cooped up at home for a long period of time, that affects our citizens so much. Things change. So we had to learn to work with our community, learn new ways, do things virtually, still keeping our community informed, but also collaborating with different local leaders to make sure that vaccines were done on time and that they were accessible to our citizens in an orderly way. So for us, we just found new, exciting ways of working with our community and keeping us all healthy, both physically and mentally, during this pandemic.
Wonderful. So we are getting close to time. So I'm just going to ask, we want to get to Q&A. There's so many questions. So if you all can just answer, the rest of the panelists can answer that in maybe 2 minutes or less, and then we can get to these questions, these burning questions from the constituents.
So I know that one of the questions you asked was about virtual court. I think that the pandemic has provided an opportunity for the courts to look at different options of providing services, having hearings, things like that, that would normally be done just in court, but then an opportunity to have it virtually because of the pandemic. There were a lot of people who were not safe in the courthouse, quite frankly. So I think there's some lessons learned there. And I think that there are certain hearings that should continue to remain virtual, because I think that it creates a lot of efficiency for everyone in the system. And I think that's something that we really need to talk through. I know the judiciary makes those decisions, but those are, I think, issues that we should put on the table and we should really talk through. Are there types of hearings that should remain virtual? Or should there be options for people who want to have a virtual hearing as opposed to an in-person hearing to have that? So I do think, you know, with any challenge, the pandemic was in fact a challenge. I think we grow and we look for opportunities. And I think that there were some efficiencies realized through some of our virtual hearings. And I don't know why those would not continue. But I think that is obviously a much larger conversation with the judiciary, because ultimately they make the decision. But I think they should absolutely get the input of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would just say that Judge Adams definitely said that it'll not be the same ever again as it was pre-COVID. We will probably always now do some type of hearing virtual, but there's always going to have to be in person. We start jury trials April 26th because there are constitutional rights that still have to be protected. But you are absolutely right, Ms. Grable. I know for a fact that Judge Adams is looking to see how she can mesh the two. And in particular, for us to address the backlog, we have to continue virtual hearings, because I will tell you, just to do one jury trial, criminal, is going to take up 3 courtrooms by itself, each one. So we definitely have to be back on the virtual track all the time.
Yep.
For the Department of Corrections, of course, we follow the CDC guidelines on how to handle and manage correctional institutions. And the CDC guidelines are a little more restrictive for correctional institutions, prisons, and jails, because of course it's a congregated living situation. My biggest concern is not the population in-house as much as it's my officers who go out in the community, or my staff, because I have also non-sworn staff who go out into the community and have to come back into the facility daily to work. So we've instituted things like mandatory testing. We have encouraged and educated staff to get vaccinated, and quite a few of them have gotten vaccinated. We've provided virtual services in collaboration with the State's Attorney's Office, Public Defender's Office. The initial hearings, preliminary hearings and all are being conducted virtual. Our facility, of course, is not a young facility. So we're working on our infrastructure to do more virtual visitation and do more virtual programming for the inmates. We do believe that that's probably going to be a primary function, and we're not going to eliminate it once we are able to implement full virtual programming and visitation, but that's the direction we're moving in.
Thank you.
And for Department of Public Safety and Corrections, I'm very pleased to say that we have learned how to manage a new way. We have over 8,000 employees. We stood up 4 vaccination clinics, and we vaccinated over 4,000 of our employees on our own. We are currently following the governor's guidance in his phases, and we have begun vaccinating our inmate population. We vaccinated our inmates that are 75 and older, that are 65 and older, the 60s and older. And today we actually started vaccinating those that are 16 and over that have comorbidities. So we are following that plan, and hopefully by May, we will have our entire population, which is some 17,000 inmates, vaccinated within the state. We also do serial testing within our facilities. All of our officers get tested once a month, starting April 5th. If you are a direct contact employee, you will be tested weekly. And we work with the guidance of MDH, Maryland Department of Health, in conjunction with guidance from CDC, so that everyone is wearing their PPE in accordance with CDC guidance. We do weekly compliance reviews. They are unannounced. We have a team that's made up of nurses, of investigative staff, environmental safety officers, and others that go around the state to our various facilities, and we walk those facilities to ensure compliance, so that we are ensuring that everyone is safe. We have established isolation and quarantine areas within our facilities, so that we can protect those that do become COVID positive and those that may have had contact with those that become COVID positive. Our medical monitors those individuals for 14 days and provides them with the necessary medical services, so that we can render them safe again. We do, if you're interested, we do post every Friday on our public website all of our statistics relating to our COVID-19. We have been blessed to stand up virtual visits for all of our population. We also give them free phone calls because of COVID, because we want them to stay in contact with their relatives and loved ones out there. So we've just been able to, we've been blessed to stand up a number of opportunities. We looked at grab and go food lunches, things because they couldn't congregate in the child halls, but we wanted them to be able to get up from out of their housing units. So walking to the child hall, grabbing their food and going back to their housing units with it. We looked at how we are able to social distance them, but still allow them to get some type of passive recreation, because we can't do the playing basketball and things of that nature that they would normally do. We even have stood up our educational opportunities virtual. We work very closely with Department of Labor, and they provide our GED programs for our staff, as well as some of our occupational training. And we've been able to do many of those opportunities virtual, as well as our second chance programs, which is our post-secondary education that we do with Goucher and other institutions. We've been able to do those things virtually as well. So while the pandemic has been drastic, it has also taught us a different way to manage. And we're hoping to take some of those opportunities that we've learned and continue to move forward with them. And I'm glad to hear one of the things that virtual courts is one of the opportunities that we can continue to look forward to, because that really helps us in public safety, especially if you have an individual that is a security risk. It's safer for us to keep him there in our facility and put him in front of that virtual platform than to have to transport him with officers and the potential of danger happening. So I'm glad to hear that as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Dr. Thank you so much for outlining those extensive opportunities that have been taking place and happening with public safety and corrections throughout the state. I'm going to stick with you and Director LeBay just really quickly, because I can see questions coming in from the chat regarding vaccinations for inmates and whether or not that is taking place. And if not, how can family, friends identify opportunities for vaccinations for recently released individuals and other resources? How can they get vaccinated ASAP, according to this question?
In Prince George's County, the jail Department of Corrections, we have started vaccinating. Of course, it's voluntary. And so an inmate has to consent to be vaccinated. We have vaccinated out of our average daily population of 700 and plus thus far, 191 inmates. I would say the best way for someone recently released, and I'm sure my reentry services staff would work with an individual, is to connect them with the health department. The Prince George's County Health Department does have a registration site. Probably the challenge for the homeless person is how they would get the appointment. But I would definitely, if the individual wanted to get in touch with me, I would definitely get them in touch with my reentry services case managers to see how that could be coordinated so that the individual can get an appointment, get vaccinated.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. I wanted to we want to move to Q&A. We have some great questions in Q&A. And Madam Chief of Staff has already started that. That question came regarding the inmates, came from our chat. A question we have some young people who are watching us right now, watching this community courthouse. And so, Madam State's Attorney, one of the questions that was asked was, what undergraduate studies can someone take if they wanted to follow in your path? And so that was a question that came on the chat. Could you talk to our young people and tell them what they have to do to get to where you are today?
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me just tell you, whatever path your heart leads you in, I can tell you that when I went to college, I thought I was going to go into engineering or biotechnology. Clearly, I'm the furthest thing from there as anyone can be. But I started just following my heart. I took classes that were of interest to me. And the great thing about law is that law is so vast that you can almost major in anything and have it apply to the work in the law that you want to pursue. So you don't have to be a pre-law major, you don't have to be an English major, you don't have to be a history major or a social studies major. You almost can major in anything. So I would say the most important thing would be to choose a major that you enjoy and do well in your classes, because you want to be able to get into the law school of your choice. And part of that is going to be, what type of grades do you have? Also, you're going to take something called the LSAT. So that's the law school admissions test. And I know that Karen and Judy and Beverly Woodard and others know a whole lot about that. So really understanding how to think critically is extremely important. So regardless of the major that you choose, I think that what you want to do is study and pursue areas that will push you to think differently or critically, coming up with your own opinions and defending those opinions. And you don't have to be a pre-law major to do that. So I would say major in whatever your heart desires. And then just work on your writing skills, your reading comprehension, and also, your ability to really put together sound arguments. So that critical thinking skill is extremely important. And I don't know if Beverly or anyone else on the panel.
Judge Woodard is smiling. That's great. Thank you, Madam State's Attorney. Judge Woodard is smiling. Yes, so I think she's in agreement with you. So that part of education, we've also had, education extremely important. And you heard our state's attorney mention, how you have to work, have good grades. Your studies are critically important. If you want to go in the field of law or any field, just do your best. The question came up with pipeline to prison reform and what does that actually mean? So if someone could talk about that, that was a question. What is prison to pipeline to prison? I know let me just go to this question. That how do you end the school to prison pipeline? And what does it mean?
I think what they mean, and one of the things that has come out in literature, particularly to those who were social conscious, is the fact that they said from the schoolhouse to the jailhouse. And they said that was the pipeline, particularly among minorities. There have been educators who have written and said that male children who are minorities and they hit the grades of second grade to fourth grade have been neglected. And as a result of it, this neglect in our school system has created America's criminal justice system. So I think when individuals are talking about the pipeline, they're talking about that pipeline that perpetuates, or the social ills of this country that perpetuates those that come into incarceration. And so then from that pipeline, how does the reform happen for reentry, that when they're returning into the community, do they have the supportive services that they need so that they could be a productive citizen? I have to say that I think the trend has been that the good thing is that we do recognize in the criminal justice field and also as social science and behavior practitioners that the trend has to change. And I think that's why we don't say ex-offender, we say returning citizen. And so we're doing collaborations. As Secretary Scruggs says, the prison system has a lot of program services, and they're preparing for getting individuals to make sure that they can become productive citizens. I know that Assistant Secretary Scruggs is working diligently and has MOUs with jurisdictions throughout the state, doing a reentry agreement where the jurisdiction will accept the individual, but not just accept them coming back to their community, to their home, but coming back, providing the right services, the workforce development, connecting them to jobs, connecting them to social services, connecting them to housing, connecting them to counseling. And so that's the reform that's going to happen from the pipeline from prison to the community. I think that's what they mean. I don't.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you. Secretary Scruggs, someone, our state's attorney would love this. Sororities went in the Q&A, someone said, how can sororities participate in reforms, prison reforms, individual coming out and being able to return back to society? Some sororities want to, and our esteemed state's attorney is a member of Sigma Gamma Rho, so she understands service and what that means in sorority.
And so is Captain Barton.
Captain, oh, she got two. Okay, I'm outnumbered. Two. So Captain Barton, or Secretary Scruggs, if you want to talk about that, what does that? Well, I have a question for. You think about this. This question is, they want to know how they get involved and be a police officer. So that's coming up for you before we end. And Secretary Scruggs, how can sororities and fraternities get involved to help out?
Thank you for that question. We have a very robust volunteer services division within the division of, within our division of corrections and within our pretrial division. So they can become a volunteer behind the wall. They can come in, they can train. There are always soft skills that the men and women need. There are various programs that they can set up with us so that they come in on a regular basis to teach them. It may just be how do you balance a checkbook? You'd be surprised how many people don't know how to do things like that. Things that they just need to be successful in their transition to society. So I would suggest that those sororities or individuals that have those opportunities that are willing to come in and partner with us, they can get in contact with either myself, which I'll share my email, or my director of social work and reentry services. And we can see what opportunities they're willing to bring to us. And we would be happy to engage them with our men and women to provide some positive impact on them and some skills that they are able to offer.
Thank you. And if everyone could put their contact information in chat, they're asking for it. Madam Captain Barton, how do people pursue a career in policing? That's the question for you. Or if they want to be a Sigma Gamma Rho, but I think the question is policing.
Oh. So first and foremost, I want to say that policing is changing. What it looked like in the past, it no longer looks that way. Perfect example, my department has 20% women. That is amazing. Those numbers it goes to show you that law enforcement is changing. But first and foremost, a high school diploma is your initial, what you need to start. Maryland National Capital Park and Planning also offers tuition assistance. So this means that when you become an officer and you start working, you can also further your education, which will give you an opportunity to grow within the department with tuition assistance. One of the other things that we do is there's always additional leadership trainings that we offer to our young officers who are working towards becoming leaders within the organization. So we recruit a lot. We're at career fairs. We go to the military, like Andrews Air Force Base, Fort Meade. We do virtual career fairs, and they can go online at Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission job site. And we are working on going virtual with our applicant testing. So we're trying to adapt to the pandemic, and because we're not going to stop recruiting, because ultimately we want the best of our community to serve our community. So that's our goal. And we are coming up with innovative ways of recruiting and doing backgrounds and hiring. And we only want the best. Ethics, morals, values. That's what my department is about. We're about serving our community, and we want the best to serve our community. So
absolutely, Lieutenant Barton, and listen, that's a good place to end. Okay, on morals and principles that I know all of our women here that have been a part of this phenomenal discussion this evening have definitely been able to share in and engage in a discussion with our community. State's Attorney Brave Boy, I'm sure you have just a few closing remarks before we close out our March 2021 Community in the Courthouse.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you all so much to all the panelists. It's just great to see you here in this platform. And I know that we often connect on other platforms. So I look forward to seeing our work together continue. But this has just been a phenomenal evening. I'm so happy that people got to know the great work that you're doing and who you are as people and as women. So I really want to just honor you by saying that. And to all of those who are listening to us, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back again next month. Next month, we'll talk a lot about legislation that we've been working on in Annapolis. The legislative session will have ended, and we'll have some of our partners who are members of the General Assembly join us for that session. So we're really excited about our April Community in the Courthouse as well. But to my new Community Affairs Director, you did a phenomenal job. Thank you so much. Madam Chief of Staff, thank you. And to the entire communications team, thank you so much for getting the word out and getting us up on Facebook so that we can, reach more individuals in our community. So thank you again for those who are participating by sending in questions. And I think we got to a lot of them. We probably didn't get to them all, but if there's a burning question, I know that Madam Chief of Staff will provide you with the appropriate email address to send your questions to so we can answer them offline. But again, thank you all so much for being here today, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam State's Attorney. You said it best. If you have any questions, my email as well as the email, my email is on a flyer as well. I know we couldn't get to all the questions. So thank you. Thank you all for joining. Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't know.